Hi folks, welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Sorry about the transition music there. I wanted to catch a little piece of that particular movement of Charles Hive's Holiday Symphony, I think it's called. That's from Washington's Birthday. I think you'll recognize the tune there as Good Night Ladies. Kind of fitting for the topic of the day. Let's talk about this picture I have behind me first. I'm going to show you a little bit more of this AI drawing that was the result of taking a Pixar animation. That's gonna want to focus here. There we go. This is what Pixar animation AI does with the prompt, an unpatriotic act. So I think it's kind of fitting. These two numby-gumby guys just going about their day-to-day life who suddenly could be defined as being unpatriotic. What's the title of this talk? I'm going to call this a commentary on the Patriot Act, the epitome of BORG adversary propaganda psyops. Now, if you're not an American and you don't know what the Patriot Act is, or if you are an American and you simply, are too young or have had your head in the sand for so long you don't know what that thing is, you probably remember what 9/11 was. We're not going to talk about anything related to that, but the Patriot Act was one of the things that resulted from 9/11. This is an act of Congress that is very controversial to this day, and is in fact one that I have had two very personal encounters with. So I thought it would be good to have a nice heart-to-heart talk about this particular act, because I think it is a good way of understanding how you may be inadvertently being used and abused to support the cardinal karmic sin of tyranny. If you remember, that's one of the core teachings that I espouse in my Omnist tradition, that goes beyond the obvious limitations of 10 commandments to a much more simple idea of sin as associated with tyranny, the use, abuse, misinformation of other souls for your own gain or benefit. And as I teach, the real adversary is not Satan or Lucifer or the devil, but actually an entity that I term BORG, a hive mind that wants to assimilate all souls into a system of automated control, taking away their individual freedoms and liberties, their individual choices, and dictating everything in a way that probably would be very popular with your typical materialist scientist that wants everything to run according to clockwork and everything to be happening based upon some understandable sequence of chemical reactions and so forth. This is how the materialist scientist thinks the world works. Materialist scientists are BORG servants. They serve the adversary. They tend to be atheists. They tend to have no appreciation for individual creativity except for their own. They think that, my mind is so perfect that I know everything. At any rate, I think the Patriot Act is a good way of illustrating this. So let's talk about what the Patriot Act does, and why it is so inherently unpatriotic and is absolutely unconstitutional. So the Patriot Act essentially gave pretty much any court in the United States carte blanche to be able to restrict the travel of anyone, foreign, U.S. citizen, anyone getting on an airplane could have their travel restricted through a system of passport control that has gradually been extended to include the system that now manifests as vaccine passports. The same infrastructure that was set up during the Patriot Act era is being used and extended to now control and regulate people based upon their medical history, based upon their political views, based upon any criteria, in fact, that the people in power choose to implement. And I'm going to illustrate through my personal experiences just how dangerous that is. I've seen it firsthand. Now, so how have I come across the Patriot Act? I'm not a terrorist, by the way. This was the original reason it was sold, is, oh, we can find out if somebody's suspected of terrorism, we can stop them from traveling and stop another 9/11 from happening before they can even board the plane to take it over and blah, blah, blah. And again, I'm not going to go into the details of all the sales pitches that they gave you to sell that and spin it as something good in the news. I'm going to trust you to do your own research and verify what I'm telling you. Okay, yeah, so how did I encounter the Patriot Act, you might ask? Well, if you were around when the Patriot Act first came into being, you will know that there was a no-fly list, that you could be put on a no-fly list, and that would get you flagged for, oh, I'm sorry, sir, we can't allow you to board this plane. In fact, we're going to take you, the TSA authorities are going to take you to this other room where you'll be held until State Department officials can interrogate you and possibly punish you for being a potential terrorist. Okay? So, you might ask, how did Rob Trump here get on the no-fly list? Well, back in, let's see, was it about 2004? No, it was actually after my first stay in China. I came back from an assignment in China, expat assignment with Hewlett Packard, and I had married while I was in China. I got my new wife home to the U.S., Chinese lady, and she became homesick and was very disappointed with the job opportunity she had in the U.S. with only a Chinese university degree. Won't go into any of the details, but basically, if you've ever been outside your own country for a long period of time, you know that between about 9 and 12 months you get really, really homesick. And so my wife at the time was begging me to go back to China. And I couldn't find a job in China. I couldn't even find a job where she was at. She was working as a flight attendant in New Jersey. And I was in Idaho, where I had returned from my Hewlett Packard expat assignment. And it was a really bad situation for us. She begged me, can we go back to China? We were so happy there. I know I can find a good job there. And my skills and talents will be appreciated and so forth. And I thought, well, okay, I suppose I can go and I can find something that I can make ends meet with over there. I did it very openly. I was still, at the time, only about 4 or 5 years out from my first divorce. And my ex was getting a lot of alimony and was worried about being able to stay living in the style to which she'd been accustomed to on alimony. She wasn't working. She had a nice house, was making a pretty good sized payment on that house still, and was afraid that her world would come crashing down. So she contacted a lawyer in an attempt to prevent me from moving to China. Got me put on the no-fly list, just on the suspicion that I might stop paying alimony. I'd never missed a payment. I had committed no crime. She got a lawyer in Colorado to get a court to put me on the no-fly list for absolutely no valid reason, violating my constitutional rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Without any cause, I committed no crime. Well, I chose to travel anyway. And to get around the restriction they put on my passport, I flew to, at the time, they weren't restricting within the United States. They weren't catching you as you were, they were catching you on international flights. So I flew to Seattle, took a bus across the border, and flew to China from Canada. Because I had a job waiting for me. I had somebody who was going to sponsor a work visa, and I'd actually been cast. That was in the middle of my acting phase of my career, and I had been cast as Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. And they were waiting to start rehearsals when I got there. So, it was all set up, and it was just like 2 or 3 days before we were supposed to move. We'd sold everything in the U.S. We had the house all ready to be sold, and we had nothing in it. And it's like all of a sudden, no, you can't go until you appear at this court proceeding, which is like 2 months out. This is the situation I was in, and I thought, simple-mindedly, as an American who thought they had some rights, they can't do this to me, can they? And so I didn't obey. I traveled anyway. I got to China and was all set to start my new. I actually had somebody who was willing to sponsor a work visa, and so I could work for them freelance and do other freelance work, which is the best way to work in China instead of being glued to one particular company. And I was going to do consulting and stuff like that, and maybe teach some English and so forth, and try to make ends meet. At any rate, I found that when I went to Hong Kong to get my work visa, I had to leave China and go back. And at that time, Hong Kong was not so much a part of China as it is now. I found out when I got to Hong Kong that I didn't have any room left in my passport for a new visa stamp. So I went into the embassy thinking to get more pages in my passport, and they confiscated it and called me aside to one of the interview rooms and grilled me as if I was a terrorist, because they had no idea. All they knew was I was on the no-fly list. And I sat in that room being grilled as if I was some kind of international terrorist, trying to explain to them that it was, just a worried ex that had got me into the situation. Not a pleasant case. I spent about 3 weeks there in Hong Kong. They confiscated my passport, said, well, we'll have to investigate this. And meantime, you're stuck here in Hong Kong. I spent about 3 weeks in limbo in Hong Kong, not knowing if I was going to get to go back to China to my wife, or if I was going to be deported to the U.S., or if I was going to be charged with some federal crime for simply having exercised my rights, my constitutional right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, having committed no crime. Needless to say, it was a very rough time for me. I very nearly committed suicide during that time. There was a moment where I was standing waiting for subway train from where the embassy stuff was back to the hostel where I was staying. thinking, you know what, I just can't deal with this anymore. If my ex is going to create this much trouble for me, and I was already in a lot of stress because I had a huge alimony payment that was more than I could make probably in China. So I was worried, and it's like, how can I please my new wife and appease my ex-wife and still have any kind of a life? And I was ready to cash it all in. There was a moment where I came that close to jumping in front of an oncoming train. And I mean that close. So, anybody out there that's listening that's ever had flirtation with suicide, tried, maybe was not successful, I've been there, I've done that. I know exactly what you're going through. And this was one of those moments. Well, long story short, they eventually called me in again and said, look, we investigated this. Here's what we're going to do. If you bring in a one-way ticket back to the U.S., show it to us, we'll give you your passport back. Normally, they said, normally we would give you a one-way travel document and not give your passport back, but just to make this whole process simpler, I think they felt sorry for me and gave me an out. Well, I got the cheapest refundable ticket I could find, showed it to them, got my passport back, and headed straight back over the border via Shenzhen back to China and my wife. And eventually the matter got settled legally. I lost the chance for the job that I had and had some very, very difficult times where I was making zero money and paying out several $1,000s a month, more than several thousands a month when you include legal fees, going through this process of trying to defend my rights. So this was time one that I ran afoul of the Patriot Act. You can judge whether they were justified in doing that to me or not. Maybe if you're of the feminist stamp, you'll think, oh, well, of course, a guy who's divorced should have to be enslaved to their ex for the rest of their life if they were making more money than she was. Whatever. Okay, so that was time one that I encountered the Patriot Act. Time two just happened recently. I've been through another divorce since then. A Chinese lady eventually divorced me and took our child, and led to another dark time in my life. I had, the week of our divorce, a major mental breakdown. One of these dark nights of the soul where I was completely out of it for about 2 weeks. And during those 2 weeks, I lost my job and signed this divorce agreement that had me paying child support based upon the income of the job I lost. Okay, after the divorce was finalized and after I got out of the mental hospital, my ex decided she'd been trying to get her mother over from China to watch our daughter and hadn't been successful. So she decided, well, if you're not going to be working anyway, why don't you return to being a full-time parent with our daughter, who's been missing you while you were in the hospital and while you've been away. Okay, so she offered to let me stay in her unfinished basement and continue to take care of our daughter full-time. And in order to make that official, I wrote up a little document describing what our agreement was, and that during this time, instead of paying her the full child support, I would pay her $200 to $250 a month, which was, if you looked at the worksheet for child support, was the amount that you would have to pay if you were a non-custodial parent and you had no income, as compared with her pretty high income from the career that she built while she was married to me, while I was helping her through college, getting her master's degree, and while I was sacrificing my career so she could build hers. Okay, fast forward. This worked out until she decided she wanted to take another job in New York City, and I didn't want to come along for the ride. Actually, I planned to come along under the condition that I would get to live in the same apartment in a different room so I could continue to take care of our daughter. At the very last minute, she decided, well, no, that can't happen because my new boyfriend isn't comfortable with you living in the same house as me, so you need to go rent a room somewhere nearby, and then you can come and take care of Eloise when I'm working or out of town, which was pretty frequent. She worked in a job where she traveled 4 or 5 days a week, sometimes for weeks at a time. And I said no. She got mad at me, horribly mad, screaming mad, threatened to call the police if I wasn't out of her house with all my stuff within a day. So I got out of the house, and okay, if that's the way you want to play it, I'm not gonna do that again. If you're gonna threaten to call the cops every time I refuse to do what you want to do and go ballistic with anger, I'm not playing that game anymore. That's what got me going crazy in the first place. That's what drove me crazy while I was a stay-at-home parent, is her constant wanting to control and dictate every parameter of my life. And if you've ever been in a relationship with a very narcissistic person, you can relate. Okay, so fast forward to last year, 2022. If you have been following my channel, you know that I live in Indonesia now. I've remarried and I have another child. Very happy here in Indonesia. At the time we married, everything looked like it was going to be okay because I was finally getting Social Security, which had been like the gating point of, I thought, freedom from obligations to my ex. And things were looking pretty good. I'd started collecting Social Security, and it was enough to have a reasonable, poor third world existence here. Not living high on the hog by any stretch of the imagination. Well, after about a year of that, my ex was bugging me to come back to the US and watch our daughter so she could take a vacation, summer vacation in 2022. I'd remarried in 2021 and started collecting Social Security in 2021. I didn't want to come back because it was the middle of COVID. And at the time she was trying to get me to come back, we were still in the middle of the biggest lockdown that we had in Indonesia. You couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't go do anything. I couldn't even travel on a bus or a plane or anything within Indonesia, let alone go back to the US. And I was not about to come back by myself to the US during that time and risk getting stranded in the US when my new child and my wife were here. And they couldn't travel with me because my son didn't have a passport yet. And my wife, being an Indonesian citizen, would have a difficult time getting a spouse visa to be able to come and visit the US. If you don't know, it's been incredibly hard to legally travel to the US, even though the borders are practically wide open to anybody who wants to do it illegally, which is another sad facet of what's happened to the USA in the recent decades. Okay, so my ex, out of spite, decided I'm going to take this old child support order, which was invalidated by our agreement, and I'm going to go get that enforced and not tell them about the change in income since that order was placed, and not change them about the agreement that we've made between each other about lowering the child support payment, and because I was taking care of Eloise full time. Okay, so there was a change. She didn't give them all the information, just said, here's the child support order, he's not paying. as if I'd been avoiding the payment all that time. Well, I'd been paying the $200 or $300 a month religiously until she started receiving the child benefit of Social Security, which was twice as much as the original child support. Well, they didn't care. They didn't even ask me, give me any chance to defend myself. They just imposed the child support order, which now has the wonderful feature of automatically, if you are declared as delinquent on child support, you automatically get your passport restricted. They just call up the State Department and say, this guy's a child support offender. And you're immediately put on the no-fly list. It happens. And they justify it, pointing out all these celebrity tennis players and actors and this and that they've gotten so much money out of. Well, I'm no celebrity, and I am not the bad guy in this situation. We had an agreement, and she lied or willfully misrepresented the situation out of spite. She doesn't need the money. She makes 10 times as much as my Social Security, even without getting any money from Social Security or from me. That's how good a job she has now. She does not need the money. It was done out of spite. Now she claimed, oh, I didn't know it was going to cause that much trouble, blah, blah, blah. What's your fault? You did it. Your action caused this. You may not have known about it, but that's the dark thing about the Patriot Act. It has unforeseen consequences. And there are program after program after program like this that they have instituted since the Patriot Act that will punish people for no reason or for a suspicion of a crime. And this is where we're going, and it's getting worse with AI. They are going to target you for not being able to travel, not being able to access your bank account, not being able to get services, book hotels, etc. And if you don't think that's going to happen, you're a fool, because it's already happening in China with the social credit scores. And that's what they want to do in the US and all around the world. They want to regulate you and control you and force you to behave exactly like they want and think exactly like they want you to think. And that is Orwellian mind control. You do as you're told, or we will cut you off. And if you don't think that is happening right now and getting worse every year, you need to wake the fuck up. You're not woke unless you realize that. And these people the woke cult, who are supporting all this nonsense through the Biden administration and the Democrat Party and the Republican Uniparty establishment, if you support those guys, you are actively shooting yourself in the head. You are actively supporting a BORG hive mind psyop. Now, what's the ultimate goal here? What the goal is and how they've done ever since the beginning of the Gaia experiment, the beginning of what we're in here, long before human civilization, with many previous civilizations. What they are trying to do is create a hive mind queen class, a beautiful people class that use and abuse and control everybody else and dumb them down to the point that they become nothing more than beasts. This is how you destroy a conscious species. You reduce them to the level of thoughtless beasts who just do what they're told. I'm just following orders. I'm just following the rules. How many people have you encountered in government that have become like that? I didn't make the laws, I'm just doing what I'm told. You find it in the police, you find it in public administration, you find it everywhere. People that have abdicated any free thought. They will not take any action, even if they see glaring tyranny in front of them, even if they see, well, wait a minute, there's something that maybe we should at least look into here and see if there's other options. No, that's the rules. That's it. I'm just doing my job. And it's gotten worse and worse since the pandemic because these people have been living in their basements and working remotely. Almost every management level employee and government servant has been living in this crazy pandemic world, completely out of touch with the real world, getting all their stuff delivered by Amazon or whatever the food delivery service is, not interacting with the real world in any way, shape, or form, not part of the normal interplay of a community where you go out and you talk about stuff. And this is the dichotomy that you're seeing in the country today. All around the world you're seeing that. You've got two classes of people. You've got the corporate elite class, the so-called beautiful people who wear their masks, take their jabs, do what they're told, and, you know, get to have the benefits of still making enough money to pay their bills, although that's a joke, as anybody who lives in China knows right now. That class is being decimated because there's just not enough work there anymore. It's so hard to do business with China that nobody wants to work there anymore. They're moving it to other countries, their business to other countries like Indonesia, that is another Asian country, but is still like the old Asia where, okay, we know some fat cat's making the rules, we're just going to do what we need to do and not pay any attention to that bullshit. And that's kind of why countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and so forth Philippines are still having relatively healthy economies, while much of the world is just being shot in the head by globalist nincompoops who think that they're helping you or are actively part of this set of psyops that is trying to turn the human species into a hive mind, thinking that, oh, I'm one of the ones who's going to have control because I'm part of the elite. And I don't mind if we wipe out a species or two as long as we survive. As long as I get the latest implants, the latest technology to make me live forever. These people are crazy, and they think like that. That's how the bull goats of the world think. The Beth Bezos. That's a good one. I was trying to think of a way of not saying the name, and it turned out to be Jesus. Jesus. That's what he thinks. He thinks he's some kind of fucking messiah. Knows better than anybody else what's good for you. And is going to force it with the power that he has as a mega billionaire. And, the Buster Muster is only a better version of those. He's completely out of touch in his bubble, too. These are not the saviors of humanity. This is not how the Messiah system works. There is not one savior that's going to fix everything for you. That's nonsense. That's not how creation works. That's not how God works. It's a distributed system. Yes, there are souls that have done more to set up and evolve the system than others, and God is one of those. But that doesn't come from power. That comes from influence. It comes from this good sense to delegate power instead of aggregate power. Souls who aggregate power are serving the adversary, the enemy of creation, the bad ideas. Okay? If you are a worshiper of power, you are, by definition, serving the adversary. It doesn't matter what power it is. It doesn't matter what ideology you think is perfect, whether you're a worshiper of capitalism, a worshiper of communism, a worshiper of Catholicism, or born-again Christianity, or New Age cosmic oneness. If your idea of perfection is aggregating power into one monolithic entity, either an individual or an oligarchy of individuals or a hive mind of every soul, mega consciousness. Oh, if we all thought the same, if we were all one, everything would be perfect. If you're one of those people, you are serving the adversary, the enemy of creation, the BORG. BORG creates hive minds. Hive minds are elitist, militant organizations of souls whose entire goal is wrapped around trying to destroy or assimilate any other collection of souls they encounter. That's evil. That's the enemy. And the Patriot Act represents that evil creeping into the God-given idea of the United States, of God-given individual freedoms, individual responsibility for those freedoms, civic responsibility of individuals, not being forced to comply, doing what is right and proper based upon an understanding of karma, or at least God's laws. The Ten Commandments are not a bad set of laws. I mean, they're a good guideline, right? They're all good ideas. They just kind of get lost in details of ethical situations which are ambiguous. It's much less ambiguous when you think of things in terms of tyranny, of use and abuse of other souls, trying to control their minds, trying to control their actions. Tyranny is propaganda. It doesn't matter if the propaganda is good for you. If you are propagandizing others to obey and to comply, you are a tyrant. Ultimately, you will be tempted to use that power in a dark way, and you will slip towards the abyss. The multiverse has planned for this. Those souls will eventually be isolated, but in the process, they're going to cause a lot of grief, because it takes a while to isolate bad souls without violating their free will, without becoming a tyrant yourself. And this is the conundrum that responsible powers have, to do what needs to be done without becoming a tyrant. And this is how you're going to have to evaluate what your government does, the acts that it passes, the decisions it makes, the presidential executive orders that come down. Evaluate it against the measure of tyranny and decide to comply or not based upon your own assessment of, is this a tyrannical act? Is it going to hurt me or my family? Is it going to cause long-term negative consequences? And I can promise you that all these extensions of the Patriot Act, the vaccine passports, the 15-minute cities, social credit scores, digital currencies, they are all going to be very, very much subject to tyrannical use if they are not well regulated by laws that protect the individual God-given freedoms of every soul. Yes, we have to stop criminals. Yes, we have to stop abuses of the system. Yes, we need to make systems immune to cyber attack and cyber crimes. Of course. That's a form of tyranny too. It's not an easy thing to do. But if you aren't talking about solutions that don't create the opportunity for new tyranny to occur, as I've illustrated the Patriot Act did, most certainly, you are going to end up serving the adversary ultimately. And service to the adversary is rewarded with the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is the mark of being assimilated into a hive mind. The BORG hive mind is the great recycler of souls who are either duplicate of either bad ideas or duplicate of other ideas that you don't need another copy of. This is what the original controlled opposition that God created was all about. Because creation is about creating new ideas and testing them, seeing if they work, seeing if they're original and they work. If a new idea is not original, well, maybe the soul might have additional good ideas that will come up, and you give them another chance, but not in the main universe of creation. If a bad idea comes up, you got to isolate them. I don't want that. Communism failed again and again and again. It's a bad idea. Why do you keep pushing it? You must be stupid. And you're going to take the mark of the beast if you are a core, die-hard communism just never been tried. So, right, we just got to do it right this time. Or if you're a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist, we just had everything with a free market and we had no government and no regulations, everything would be perfect. Everybody would do just the right things and we'd all be happy. These people are stupid. They are bad ideas personified, and their souls do not deserve to be anything more than mindless beasts. And that's what they will be when their souls transmigrate, either through death or through committing thinking or being about to commit an act that is illegal in this universe. That's how the multiverse works. That's how we keep experiments going, like the grand experiment of creation, like the United States, like whatever, thing that we worked on, scientific experiments, etc., artistic experiments. They continue because the next Einstein doesn't get killed by a accident by an unconscious numbie who's driving along the freeway and zones out. That doesn't happen because they get switched out to another universe, a parallel universe, where the crime happens effectively, and then come back after they've gotten a chance to make their mistake, with a karmic ding on their record. That's how laws are enforced spiritually. That's how we can keep the whole creative apparatus going and still provide free will and free choice to souls. Eventually, if a soul keeps on screwing up, keeps on causing problems, no universe is going to want them. And that's when they go get recycled. That's when BORG steps in and says, I'll take them. Come and be assimilated into the one. We're going to give you nirvana forever and ever and ever, and pull you into the source and give you love, 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 love. And your soul gets recycled, you get wiped, and you get assigned to be, the embodiment of a grain of sand or something. Whatever. I don't wish that on anybody. Maybe that's your wish. If that's what you want, go ahead and bow to the great cosmic source and I don't want to return to source. I'm just going to zone out and there's no evil, non-duality. Okay. That's your choice. I just have to warn you about stuff that you might want to be aware of. Because to me, many of you who are stuck in these poles of oneness, of idealism, of if only this, then everything would be perfect. You look to me like these two cats that the AI drew, committing unpatriotic acts. Unconscious things that might get you in trouble. From a spiritual standpoint, that's the risk you take. And you can minimize the risk by knowing that the cardinal karmic sin is tyranny. Compliance with tyranny, supporting tyranny, enabling and normalizing tyranny is a sin by association. Every time a tyrannical act comes out of your government and you comply, oh, I'm afraid I'd lose my job, I'm afraid this, I'm afraid that, I'm just going to go along with it. Because it doesn't really affect me. If my neighbors disappear, or, you know, my friend can't fly and loses his job and something, that's not my problem, right? That's his problem, okay? This is compliance with tyranny. And we got to stop doing that if we don't want to be beasts. Okay, so I hope that is a clear message. I hope it was useful. Like, share, subscribe. Help out in any way you want. If you'd like to see more of this kind of content, or you'd like me to talk on other subjects, I'd be glad to work with you. In fact, I'd be glad to have anybody who wants to pick holes in anything I've said on the channel with me. Side by side, mano a mano. I play fair. I don't put people down. I don't call names too much. I lay it out like I see it. And if you've known me through the years, you know that I've changed my mind on a lot of things. I'm more than happy to be persuaded that anything I've told you on this channel or in my books is wrong. In fact, I've amended some of what I put in my books based upon further discoveries. You'll find in my channel a much clearer presentation of the system of creation than I had when I wrote my book, for instance. At any rate, I hope you find this useful. I hope that YouTube doesn't find it so objectionable that they even further shadow ban me than they already have. And until next time, I'm Rob Trump with the Honest Hour. Happy Karma.